and then vocabulary. So let's review the tips for writing the advantages and disadvantages essay. Once we've done that, I will review the tips for the outweigh essay. So, advantages and disadvantages. Number 1, you got to analyse the essay question. The first thing you need to do is identify the issue. So that means look at the actual topic. What is this about? And every advantage, every disadvantage must connect with this issue. Then you need to also check the meaning of the language in the essay question. So you remember we looked at if it talks about children doing paid work or older children doing paid work. So check the language in the essay question to make sure that you've got the exact issue and you've understood it fully. The next point, there is no opinion required. This is just give the advantages, give the disadvantages. You don't need to give any opinion at all in this essay. Number 3, plan your advantages and disadvantages. Now, the most you can have is 3 advantages or 3 disadvantages, but most of the essays will probably just have 2. So aim for 2 advantages, 2 disadvantages. If you want 3, then it's possible, but don't make your essay too long. You're not going to get a higher band score because you've got 3 advantages. So think about it carefully and make a decision. Number 4, plan your supporting points. So remember, this essay is not just about having the ideas, it's about explaining the ideas. So think about how you're going to explain. Will you add more detail to explain it more fully? Or will you add an example or something like that? So think about that and plan it before you start writing. Number 5, think about your vocabulary. Remember your synonyms for advantages and disadvantages. Now remember that when you use synonyms, when you paraphrase, it doesn't mean that you cannot repeat words. Of course you can. Even band score 9 will have some words repeated. And you will see that I have used maybe benefits twice. It's fine. But just make sure that you do demonstrate some flexibility with your vocabulary. So let's have a look at tip number 6. Tip number 6, the structure. You should be having 4 paragraphs. The introduction, advantages, disadvantages, conclusion. 4 paragraphs. Remember that the introduction has 2 statements and it's usually between 40 to 50 words in length. Each body paragraph, you've got 2 body paragraphs, they're going to be around 90 to 95 words each. They should be balanced or almost balanced. Even if there's 1 sentence difference, it's okay. The conclusion is usually just 1 statement. You don't need to have 2. Don't make your conclusion longer than the introduction. It's a waste of time. Your conclusion just serves 1 purpose. When it's done, finish. Remember, this is a timed essay, so spending too long on something that's not important is not going to help your band score. Looking at the introduction, you've got 2 statements. You paraphrase the essay question for the background statement, and the thesis statement lists the advantages and refers to the disadvantages, but doesn't list them. You go to the topic sentence for body paragraph number 1, so that's your first sentence. 2 ways to begin. On the one hand, there are. And when you continue this, you write about the actual essay topic. So there are some benefits to children doing paid work. Remember, your topic sentence has got to include what this paragraph is about. Not just the advantages, but also the essay question, the issue that we're dealing with. You could also start instead directly with 1 advantage if you want. And that's what we do when we've got 3 advantages. Firstly, 1 benefit. And again, you've still got to introduce the essay question, which is 1 benefit to children doing paid work is, and then you give your benefit. Looking further at body paragraph number 1, this is the advantages. Your linking for the advantages will be firstly and secondly. Thirdly, if you have 3. Try to stick with this. It's not a rule for IELTS, but this is the academic way and the best way to write your IELTS essay. So learn it and use it. Now let's have a look at tip number 10. Tips for the second body paragraph for the disadvantages. So we've got to look at the topic sentence. Now, if you started your first body paragraph with "on the one hand," you must use "on the other hand" to start your second body paragraph. If you started your first body paragraph with "firstly," one benefit is you can still use "on the other hand," because "on the other hand" can be used independently, but "on the one hand" cannot. It must go with "on the other hand." So we can always use "on the other hand, one problem." And don't forget, it's a new paragraph. This is the disadvantages, and you have to introduce the essay topic again, which is one problem of children working for money. Don't forget, every time you start a body paragraph, you've got to start fresh and introduce the issue of the essay question again. If you look at the linking for the disadvantages, we're not going to use firstly, secondly, we're going to use one problem, another issue is. So don't repeat your linking methods, use something different. The conclusion. Make sure that you list the disadvantages, but only refer to the advantages without listing them. So remember, try not to make your conclusion too long. Now let's have a look at linking devices and referencing, which is all about coherence and cohesion, and that's 25% of your marks. Now, we've got the introduction, the body paragraphs and the conclusion. In the introduction, we used "although" in one sentence and "but" in the second sentence in the thesis statement. Remember, you can't use "although" and "but" in the same sentence. In body paragraph number 1, we used "firstly," and that was the topic sentence, and we did introduce the topic, which was children doing paid work. And this refers back. Remember, you can't use this in a paragraph if you haven't introduced the subject. So we've got this, we've got secondly, by doing this, thirdly, these skills. So linking and referencing. Looking at the second body paragraph, we've got "on the other hand," one problem. For example, as a result, another issue, so we used as therefore. So we had a different range of linking devices, and again, that is also the benefit of planning your supporting points, because if you only state your advantages or disadvantages without an extra supporting statement, it becomes very mechanical, firstly, secondly, thirdly. But when you introduce your supporting points, you start having a nicer range of language and linking devices. For the conclusion, we started with "in conclusion." You could use "to conclude" or "to sum up." Please don't try to use anything else. You don't need it. If this can get you a band score 9, use it. We also had "while," which has the same meaning as "although." So if you use "although" in the introduction, use "while" in the conclusion. And we also had "also." So we've got quite a nice range of linking devices. They are used flexibly and they're not repeated. So that's nice. Now it's time to look at the tips for the outweigh essay. Let's first look at what's similar. So the first thing that's similar is that you do still have to analyse the essay question. You've got to identify the issue, you've got to look at the language and the meaning in detail before you start brainstorming. The structure and paragraphs are going to be the same. It's still going to be 4 paragraphs, the introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. The background statement is going to be the same. It's the same technique. The ideas, so what I mean are the advantages and the disadvantages, you brainstorm them in the same way. You're going to use the same ideas. And then you look at signposting and linking for the advantages and the disadvantages. You're going to use the same technique to order your advantages and disadvantages. So firstly and secondly, in body paragraph 1, one problem, another issue or another negative aspect in body paragraph number 2. So those are the similarities. Now let's focus on the differences. The main difference, of course, is that when the question asks, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, it's asking for your opinion. You need to give it. So you must give your opinion for this essay. Now, I have a number of people asking me about how to express your opinion. And I have students writing in saying, can I write, "It is believed that," using a passive voice? Or do I need to say, "I think," or "I believe," or "in my opinion"? Well, using a passive voice is referring to other people, not referring to yourself. It is believed by others that. That's the reason that we use the passive voice. One, it refers to other people, and two, it's showing that the person who believes is not really important to the sentence. So, for both reasons, using the passive voice to express your own opinion is wrong, completely wrong. You do have to give your opinion directly. The examiner will look for it, and the only way to express your opinion is to use I or my. Now, if the essay does not ask for your opinion, so for example, advantages and disadvantages, that didn't ask for your opinion, you don't use I or my in the essay. So we use I or my only to express our opinion when the instructions ask for it. So, very important that. Number two, your opinion will be written in the introduction as a thesis statement. So your background statement's the same, the thesis statement will be different. It will be, in my opinion, I believe that, and you explain if you think the advantages or the disadvantages are more important. Number three, the topic sentences, going to the body paragraphs now. The topic sentences, the first sentence of each body paragraph, will support your view and need to be very carefully written. So let me quickly summarise that for you. The topic sentence for the first body paragraph starts with "admittedly" when we don't think this side is very important. You can use basic or minor if it can be applied to the ideas you're using. In your topic sentence, the first sentence of every body paragraph, you do need to highlight that these are the benefits you're talking about. Again, you give the actual subject matter, which is the issue of the essay question, children doing paid work. Each sentence that starts your body paragraph is written in full, like a complete answer to the essay question. The second body paragraph starts "nevertheless, despite the above advantages," or "despite the above positive aspects, I believe children face serious issues from work experience." We've got the linking devices, we've got the opinion, because that's the side that we're agreeing with most. We repeat the subject matter, which is children and work experience, and we mention that they are the disadvantages, which are serious, because we're stressing the importance. And remember, if your view is the other way round, then you would start with "despite the drawbacks below," and then you would start with "admittedly." So that is how you would write your topic sentences. They will express the view, they will show whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage, they will introduce the subject matter again, and it will be a nice complete beginning to the paragraph. Another thing you'll have to change are the supporting points. Now, depending on your advantages and disadvantages, you need to think about how to explain them, because that explanation must support your view. So if you want, you can add extra detail, like "this is crucial, essential," to stress your view. Or if you need to, you might need to add a sentence which explains why you don't support this side. For example, when we talked about children and exploitation. So think about your supporting points. All this should be planned before you start writing. And now there's one more difference that we have to look at. The conclusion is also going to be different because you need to restate your view. So those are the differences. Now let's just have a look at a few tips for both types of essay. Firstly, plan your ideas and select the best ones. I have a lot of students who can think of lots of advantages and disadvantages, and they think if they put more advantages in, they get a higher band score. That is not the case. You're going to get marked on your ability to present and support your ideas. The supporting points are the key. So please plan your advantages and disadvantages and then select them. So remember, you're probably going to aim for 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages. At most, you might have 3 advantages and 2 disadvantages. Be in control of your essay. Make sure that the ideas connect to the essay question 100%. So you're not writing just about work, you're writing about children at work. So make sure they are fully relevant. The next one, have a balanced essay. So that means the body paragraphs need to be balanced. Don't have a fully extended body paragraph for the advantages and then a short one for the disadvantages, because then you're going to get marked down on your ability to develop ideas. So make sure that there is a balance. If it is 1 sentence extra, that's fine, but on the whole there's a balance. And when you've got 2 body paragraphs, you're aiming for about 95 words each. Now, the last question, this is a question for you rather than a tip. What happens if you can only think of 1 advantage? Of course, it might not be possible to think of 2. So let me just show you the structure and linking device if that happens. Here's an example of the essay structure for the advantages and disadvantages essay when you can only think of 1 advantage. This is when you have an emergency and you can't think of any more. So you would have the same introduction, but you would have 3 body paragraphs. And what you would have is 1 advantage in the first body paragraph, and you can start with the main advantage, and then you introduce the rest of the topic sentence. Your disadvantages would then be divided into 2 body paragraphs, 1 disadvantage in each. So each body paragraph has 1 disadvantage in. You can have on the other hand to contrast with that, and then you've got 1 problem. Finally, because this is your last body paragraph before the conclusion, another issue is. So again, the examiner can see that these are the disadvantages. So the difference would be your organisation and your method of writing your topic sentences. Now, I have seen a student who had 1 advantage and then they wrote 1 long body paragraph with 3 disadvantages in. This would give them a very low band score for organisation and also for the development of ideas. If you're going to have only 1 advantage, then make sure you use the 3 body paragraph approach and you organise your ideas into separate paragraphs. So that's if you have an emergency. Now it's time to have a look at vocabulary, and I want to have a look at some of the idioms that we used and the difference between idioms and idiomatic language. To get band score 7, 8 and 9, you need to start using idiomatic language. But many students do make a mistake and they think that that means you need to use idioms. Now, idioms are just 1 type of idiomatic language, and that type is not usually suitable for essay writing. Now, in this essay, I did use 2 idioms. Money does not grow on trees. Now, I didn't use it as an independent sentence. I used this inside a sentence. Firstly, that's how you need to use it, and secondly, this is okay to use for writing. In the long run, which means if you're looking long term, you can also use this idiom in your writing. These are just 2 examples of idioms that you can use. Most idioms you can't use. It's probably better to avoid them unless you've already seen them used in an essay. So you now know that these 2 are okay to use. Idiomatic language, however, other types are fine to use. Let's take a look at these 2. Most students don't realise that that is idiomatic. They think that's just part of normal language, but actually it's idiomatic. To take the first steps in doing something, that's idiomatic. You're not actually going to walk. That's why it's called idiomatic language, because it's more descriptive. So take the first steps in learning, for example. Or the key to something, the key to success, the key to a good future. That's also idiomatic. So there's quite a lot of normal idiomatic language that you can use. So just be careful, avoid idioms unless you know they're safe to use. And if you do use them inside a sentence rather than as an expression on their own. And other types of idiomatic language, which are easier to understand the meaning for, are fine to use. So let's now review the vocabulary that we have used in this lesson. For the issue that was involved in this essay, it was paid work. So the paraphrases: paid work, working for money, work experience, being employed, and earning money. So there's a good range of paraphrases that you could use, but remember, you don't have to paraphrase all the time. Don't over-paraphrase. And you can also use this, so for example, referring back to it. Work experience doesn't actually mean earning money. A lot of work experience is actually unpaid. However, using it in this essay, further down the essay, not in the introduction, but further down, means that the context is understood and the meaning refers to this. So don't worry about that. We looked at experience. You could have useful experience or beneficial experience. And if you want to make that stronger, you can talk about extremely useful experience. So instead of using the word very, we can use extremely, which is more suitable for essay writing. We also looked at stressing, for example, benefits. We've got crucial, essential, vital, critical. So very useful words to use, all paraphrases. Let's have a look at some more vocabulary. In the essay, we expressed our opinion that the disadvantages far outweigh the advantages. And of course, if you want to paraphrase that, you could say greatly outweigh. And we use far and greatly when we believe there's a big difference between the advantages and disadvantages. So if that is your opinion, you can use those words. If you feel that the difference isn't so big, then just omit the word, don't use it. In the essay question, they talked about something being harmful, and we paraphrase that as detrimental. We also wrote about becoming independent, so children can become independent. Now you can paraphrase that by changing the verb and changing the form of the word. And we could write to gain independence. And when you do this, you're showing the examiner skill, because you're changing the word form and you're showing the examiner that you do know that there will be a different verb used. We wrote about not to waste money. Now, if you want to paraphrase that, you could say not to be frivolous with money. Now, frivolous is spelt F-R-I-V-O-L-O-U-S, and it's a really great word to use. So here's an example of the sentences. People should not waste money. People should not be frivolous with money. We also wrote about self-supporting adults. If you want to paraphrase that, you could say adults who are financially independent. In the essay, we wrote about to enforce the law, and that means to ensure that the law is followed. Now, this is an example of a very good collocation, and the examiner would pay attention if you wrote it, because you're using exactly the right verb to match the noun for the right meaning. We wrote about to manage money, and you can paraphrase that using the noun money management. So again, this is about changing word forms to show your skill with the English language. We wrote about to escape poverty, but you could also write to escape the poverty cycle. So don't forget, if you decide to use the word cycle, then you're going to have an article. But if you only use poverty, there's no article. So always be careful about the articles, and if you're using them correctly, that will be part of your band score for grammar. We wrote about negligible wages, and that means extremely low salary or extremely low wages. To be protected by law, again, the examiner's going to check your prepositions to see if you're using the right ones. So always check them and study them and make a note of any that you make a mistake with. We talked about balancing finances, and you can paraphrase that by writing to earn a salary and pay bills. Again, these are collocations, which is the right verb with the right noun. Now, in the alternative outweigh model essay, in the conclusion, I wrote about to stand them in good stead. Now, this is idiomatic and very suitable for essay writing. So again, very high band score. You've got to pay attention when you use idiomatic language because it can't be altered. So for example, you can't change the adjective. You can't suddenly say useful stead because that would mean you've written the idiomatic language incorrectly. So you've got to be very careful. There's not much flexibility with idiomatic language. The verb is stand. If you're writing about a person, it goes after the verb. In is the preposition, good is the adjective, and stead is the noun. So you've got to make sure that you are writing it correctly. And the meaning is that it is of value to them. So for example, a good education stands them in good stead for their future. Soft skills. If a student or a person has good soft skills, it will stand them in good stead for their future work. So it's all about being of value. Well, that's the end of the lesson. It's time now for you to go through the tips again that I've provided in a handout, reread the model essay, review the lesson again, and start making notes of anything you think you might forget. I will see you again in another IELTS lesson.